Attention active members, in order to earn credit towards LMHF Wellness Program Part 2, you must watch the video in its entirety and email Mia Vicario at mia.vicario@lmhf.net to receive wellness credit. Hi everyone, this is Jared Beyer again. Today I'm going to be talking about maximizing the use of cardio equipment. There's a lot of equipment out there and I just want to go through this PowerPoint and discuss the best ways to use it effectively. There's a lot out there, some of it good, some of it bad, some of it is really beneficial. So my presentation today is the best ways to use this different types of cardio equipment for the best results. So number one, what is cardio? So cardio is short for cardiovascular. So it's basically working your heart and lungs and making that system more and more efficient. So the main thing we look at is aerobic versus anaerobic. So aerobic is something that you can get enough oxygen. It's usually a low to moderate intensity. You're not really getting that muscle burn. Whereas as you transition over to an anaerobic type exercise, you're actually starting to break down more glycogen and carbohydrates in your muscles, which create that muscle burn. So typically when we talk about cardio, it can be all different intensity levels, from walking, to moderate intensity stuff all the way up to sprinting. That's still considered cardio. So the differentiation is the big thing I want to talk about, but really it's the heart and lung conditioning we're looking at. So improving the strength of your heart, so each time your heart beats, you're actually pumping out more blood, you're getting in more oxygen, your lungs are trained really well. We don't hear a lot of talk about training your lungs, but really that's what you want to be doing when you're doing the proper types of cardio. And you want to really develop this aerobic base. So if you're just starting off, if you had asthma, if you have any other health issues like that, you want to develop what's called an aerobic base. So that's really just a foundational type thing, whereas if you get easily winded going up and down stairs, you want to develop that aerobic base. So really start off slow and build yourself up over time. So it's for people that don't really do cardio per se, that maybe have some issues getting started. Developing the aerobic base is something that we'll discuss more at length, but that's something that's really important as you develop, because that's a foundation to building and moving forward. So if you watch TV or can read a book while doing cardio, that's more activity. That's not really a higher level. Even if it's outdoors, if you're doing that, talking with a friend, that's more activity, which is important, but that goes more toward the 10,000 steps a day than it would be considered cardiovascular exercise. So again, the aerobic versus anaerobic. So when you cross over from being aerobic to anaerobic, the main thing that will happen is you'll have to start breathing through your mouth. So when you get winded like that, even if you've gone up several flights of stairs, you have to breathe through your mouth and you feel winded. That's the way that you would tell if your body crossed over from aerobic to anaerobic. It's called the anaerobic threshold. This will happen, and again, like I said before, you'll probably get some muscle burn, maybe some lung burn if it's something that's a longer duration, but really it's based on a percentage of your heart rate. So whenever you look at focusing on heart rate and things like that, it's all based on percentages of your max. So when we look at activity, that's a low intensity. So if you're walking or doing something like that, that's activity. That's not really exercise. That, again, goes towards your 10,000 steps a day. Moderate activity would be considered more cardio and things like that. Then you go to a high intensity or max output, so that'd be more conditioning or interval type stuff. So those type of things you wouldn't be able to sustain for a long period of time. Moderate would be a moderate amount of time, and low intensity you could sustain for a long period of time. So those three different intensity levels would be rated or focused on your intensity through heart rate. So heart rate training is a huge thing. Zone training, we'll talk more about that. And those are the keys to look at when it comes to training. So there's different training zones that we look at. You'll see these common charts like this that have color-coded. Sometimes they'll be on the cardio machines and it'll say, okay, here's your age, here's the range you should be in based on that. And those are our calculations, and these are these different levels. So if you're looking at improving overall conditioning or improving that aerobic base, you're going to be the low to moderate range. As you develop that over time, what happens is your heart rate doesn't go as high with that same amount of stress. So you gradually have to bring it up. So you would always use your heart rate as your gauge. Some days you might be tired, your heart rate might be higher, might be under more stress. You're always going to use your heart rate as your gauge of how hard you're going. So that's where you're going to adjust, if you're on a treadmill per se, your speed or your incline to adjust to that. And there's programs on most of that equipment that would be heart rate regulated, whether using the sensors on the machine or a chest strap or anything else like that. Those things actually work really well to kind of keep you in the right zone. The other big thing we look at is improving your resting heart rate. So the lower your resting heart rate, the less stress there is on your heart. That's one of the biggest things to look at when it comes to cardiovascular exercise, is keeping your resting heart rate low and or dropping it lower and lower. That's a huge thing when it comes to longevity for your heart. You're taking a lot of stress off it. But as you're doing this exercise, your heart actually gets bigger and stronger. Just like your muscles get bigger and stronger, your skeletal muscles, your cardiac muscle will do the same thing in response to training. So when we look at tracking your heart rate, there's several ways to do that. So number one, the sensors on the machines, whether it's an elliptical on the handles, treadmill on the handles, things like that, they're going to pick up a signal. Sometimes you might not get a good conduction if you have lotion or something on your hands. Some people just don't conduct well through their hands. So those are the main things to look at when you have a sensor. With a treadmill, you're typically not really ever holding on long term, so it's just to test it. Or an elliptical, you're pretty much holding on most of the time. But the main thing to look at with those sensors is they're pretty accurate, but sometimes they take some time to get the proper reading, so it's not an instant measurement. It's better to use a chest strap or something that's going to constantly read up on the display instead of having to stop and use something like that. So again, using the chest strap with a cardio piece is very important and does work really well. You can also get armbands now. I know Polar makes armbands, some other companies. Those are pretty accurate. And then obviously wrist monitors. So the one thing with wrist monitors, as I discussed in a previous presentation, is they're great for steady state things, but if you're doing intervals up and down, they're not really great and accurate at tracking that. So chest straps and armbands are much more effective for that if you really need that accurate transcription. So again, smartwatches, activity monitors are great for this kind of stuff. There's a lot of apps. I know that there's an app where you can actually put your finger over the light on a phone, and that'll actually give your heart rate and whatnot. So there's a lot more of this health technology that's advancing. So the main thing to look at when improving or tracking your progress is, again, like I discussed, reducing your resting heart rate. The more you lower that, the better off you're going to be. And the way to really test that is to make sure that when you're taking your resting heart rate, you're actually resting. So for 5 to 10 minutes, you're actually going to take your pulse. The best way to do that is before you get out of bed in the morning, take your pulse and take the average of 3 days, and that's roughly your resting heart rate. An activity watch or something like that will also always record that. Something I discussed before in one of the presentations, and that'll show your progress over time, how things are changing. But again, the stronger your heart muscle is, the more volume of blood that's going to be pumped out, because your heart rate is regulated by how much oxygen your body needs. If you're working faster and faster or higher intensity, your body's going to pump faster to get that oxygen to the cells. This is what's considered the training effect. So the training effect of doing proper cardio is lowering your resting heart rate and also pushing more blood out with each pump, so it takes a lot of stress off your heart. Warm-ups and cool-downs, I've discussed this quite a bit at length in many of my presentations, and they are essential, so you must warm up and cool down. Warm-up is very, very important. I see a lot of people when they start to exercise, they don't do much warm-up at all. They'll do a couple twists and turns and things, or stretch. That is not effective. Basically, warm-up is essential to your performance, especially for your heart and lungs, because you need to gradually bring up your body's temperature, your respiration rate, your perspiration rate, get your body ready for what you're going to be doing. So about 5 to 10 minutes, and typically do that on some type of cardio equipment and get your body going before you really jump into the workout. So even if you're planning on just doing cardio, you don't want to just jump on it and run or jog or whatever you're going to do, or just go full intensity. Gradually build yourself up, and a lot of machines actually have a button on there for warm up and or cool down. If it's a program, they're naturally going to have that built into it. So those are keys to look at. So if you get a light sweat before you begin, that's when you know your body's ready to start your workout. Again, whether it's weight training or resistance training or cardio, once you get that light sweat, you feel like you're ready to go, then you jump into your program. But don't do it without starting with a warm-up. Now, the second part is the cool down. Once you've completed your workout, you need to gradually bring your body's temperature down, you need to bring your respiration rate down, you need to bring your heart rate down slowly. Now, what commonly happens if you don't do that, if you finish a workout that's tough and you just sit, what happens is you get what's called blood pooling. So the blood is pooling in your arms and legs, and it's hard for your heart to pull it back. So it actually creates more stress on your heart, which we don't want. So make sure you're doing the proper type of cool down. This is the best time to throw in stretching and things like that. In the beginning, when you're doing a warm-up, I usually recommend more dynamic stretching, doing kind of the stuff that you would be doing during the workout. And then at the end, that's where you do the common like static stretching to hold things and, you know, take time to bring your body temperature down and cool down. Okay, so the FIT principle for this is frequency, intensity, time, type, and enjoyment. So for cardio, I typically tell people to try and do 3 to 5 days per week, not every day. You can be active every day, but doing specific cardio should only be done about 3 to 5 days per week. Your intensity level is based on your goals, obviously low, moderate, or high intensity. And the time for those, if you're doing something that's low intensity, it's going to be longer duration. Moderate intensity a little bit shorter, but high intensity is going to be the shortest. In terms of what type, obviously you can be using machines indoors. You can do stuff outdoors. Obviously there's a lot of different modes of exercise. And variety is key. It's got to be something you enjoy doing. A lot of people hate running. If you don't like running, pick something else. So kind of mix it up as much as you can. All right, so the treadmill is the first one we're going to talk about. So it's not really like walking or running outdoors. It's really different because there's no variety to it. It's flat. There's no unevenness, nothing to step over. It's a different, like your stride length is pretty much consistent, whereas outside it does change quite a bit based on the terrain. And we don't really realize when we're walking on sidewalks, sometimes they're tilted left or right. So it's actually, if you're just walking, it's better to, if the conditions are right, it's better to walk outdoors than on a treadmill. But the thing with the treadmill is it's going to record everything and kind of keep, you know, your speed consistent. Whereas if you use an activity monitor outside, it's basically the same kind of thing. You're taking that device outside with you. So the main thing on a treadmill is you're just going to be able to modify your speed and incline. There's not too much else to do that, but it is only one direction. There are some advanced things that I will talk about, but one of the big things I mentioned before is you don't want to hang on to the bars. I've seen this so many times at a gym. People have an incline and they're up and, you know, they're holding on like they're being dragged. You do not want to do that. Pump your arms and try and stay within the cage of the sensors and the handles. Don't go too far back on a treadmill. I've seen people fall off and whatnot. But some highly advanced things to do, which I wouldn't recommend for most, but if you're more advanced, things I've done with a lot of pro athletes I've trained. Interval sprints. So if you're doing a sprint, you keep the belt going and you actually step off on the side rails. You have to be very careful about your speed of your hip as you get on so you don't trip as you jump onto the treadmill belt. But they're very effective, so you would keep the belt going, step off to the sides on the intervals, on, off for whatever time you're going to be doing it. The next one is probably the most difficult, but this one's usually at a very slow speed. These are treadmill spins. So you'd be going forward about 10 paces, side, shuffle 10 paces, backwards 10 paces, other side 10 paces, and then forward, and then go the opposite direction. Again, these are much more advanced things, but if you're bored of doing common treadmill workouts, these are some of the things you can do. Next would be an exercise bike. I always recommend an upright bike versus recumbent. Recumbents were designed really they claim for people with back problems, so you have back support. Back support is actually weakening your muscles, especially your core. So I always recommend people to use an upright bike. And with that bike, make sure you adjust, number one, the seat height, and some of the seats will actually slide forward and back for your hips. Those are things you really want to adjust and make it comfortable. A lot of bikes out there, the older bikes, were not very comfortable at all. So make sure you're choosing a bike that is going to be adjustable. And again, typically that seat sliding forward and back is very important. But they're great to warm up with. There are a lot of programs on bikes, whether they're interval programs, heart rate monitors programs. There's a lot of things you can do with the modern day bikes. They're self-generated, so typically you need to actually give it enough power to power the display, and that's usually between 45 and 65 RPMs. One other thing on a bike, if you go too fast on a magnetic bike, you actually lose the resistance. So don't go too far over like 70 RPMs, otherwise you'll kind of lose that. Other types of bikes would be like spinning bikes or Peloton bikes, which are huge these days. Those are going to have a weighted flywheel, so one thing with them is that motion or that weight of the wheel is actually going to carry you through it. So some of the workout, you're being pulled through the pedals, you're not really actually working as much. So it's a big thing nowadays, and there's a lot of interactive things with spin bikes, but sometimes you kind of lose some of that. So that's something that you're not actually pushing some of it because the weight of the wheel is actually pulling you around. Next would be the elliptical. So one thing with elliptical is it's very low impact on your joints, but it's also very low impact on weight loss. The reason for that is that the arms and legs, as you get them going, they just kind of keep going. You're kind of riding with it. So you're not really burning a ton of calories. If you like to use an elliptical, make sure that you're actually changing the position of your feet. So one thing is it is a two-direction type machine. You can pedal it forward or you can pedal it backward. If you go forward, you want to lift your heels slightly. Some of the newer machines actually do angle as they come forward, but if they stay flat, lift your heels slightly as you go forward. As you go backwards, push with your heels and lift your toes slightly. Another thing I recommend is trying to do it without holding on the handles here or the handles that move. The main reason for that is, number one, is that when you hold on the handles up top that move, you're actually leaning forward slightly, and it could actually, irritate your low back. So what I typically tell people to do is try and stand up straight. If you need balance, you can hold on the little handles here that don't move. But those kind of things are better to use these for. Again, I'm not a huge fan of them because once you get that going, it's almost like a perpetual motion machine. So it's not like you're working as hard, similar to a spin bike. Rowing machines are probably the best cardio machine you can buy. The main reason for that is they're working a lot of retraction, so they help a lot with posture and your hamstrings. So they're very effective at helping bring your posture into alignment. They are very challenging if you do them the right way, but I always recommend you doing them with intervals instead of like just going and rowing for 10 or 15 minutes. That's more aerobic rowing. If you use them the right way, I like to have people do Tabatas or intervals with them. So 20 seconds work, 10 seconds rest, and in that 20 seconds, try and get 11 repetitions. One other thing form-wise with rowers, as you come forward, you should be slightly leaning forward, but not all the way down, and you should never lean all the way back past like an upright position. So as you come in, you want to really pinch your shoulder blades in the back. As you go forward with your legs, you actually want to go forward just a little bit with your upper body, but make sure you keep that proper form. You see this a lot with people that don't know how to do the proper form. Two things you can do with that is, number one, you can pull it to your chest. Number two, you can do a high row, so actually go towards your neck. You can also do a supinated row if the bar is straight, but if it's an angled bar, it doesn't work so well if you're trying to do it supinated, palms up. But in general, try to do 10 or 11 repetitions in 20 seconds. Okay, the other one I really like is an Airdyne bike. These have been around for a long, long time. So this is a true upper and lower body workout. The fan itself is very difficult to move. These are used a lot for conditioning for athletes, and I've owned probably 10 of these bikes over the years. They're excellent bikes to use. They've been made for a long, long time. You'll see some old, interesting colored vintage ones with these giant displays on them. They were recommended by cardiologists years ago for cardiac rehab. So a lot of people that went through that were recommended to buy these bikes, and like most people, they didn't really use them. So you can find used bikes like this for free. I've bought them for $25 a piece, and they do not break down. The one difference is the display can vary quite a bit, but I like to use modern technology, so actually you can take the display right off. You don't even need that. There's some of the old ones have these giant displays. Now the newer ones are really pretty small. These are the big fan bikes, which are more effective. The smaller the other fan bikes are much smaller. They're not as challenging, but these can be very, very challenging. One other thing you do with these is just your arms. Put your feet on the pegs and just crank it with your arms. So it can be just upper body. You can just kind of modify it that way, but really, really is a great piece. And like I said, you can find them very inexpensive used. All right, so outdoor things, I just want to mention this. I know my presentation is more on machines, but again, by using modern technology, whether it's your phone apps and things like that, you can take all the stuff you're doing inside and do it outside. So based on the weather conditions, jogging or running, I don't recommend people jog if you can see your breath outside. That's actually putting a lot more stress on your lungs and can create a lot more issues with your heart. Track work, if there's a track close by to you, break it up into 4 quadrants. Run the straightaways, walk the turn. Run the straightaway, walk the turn. That's very effective. One other big thing is stairs outside. So Crosby Field, obviously in Kenmore there, is one of the best fields. I brought a lot of my pro athletes there to train. They have that concrete bleacher system. Excellent. It's not too high, not too short. It's great for interval type stuff. You sprint up it, walk down, sprint up, walk down. It's very, very effective. You see a lot of people doing that. And obviously biking outside, there's lots of types of biking. If you're buying a bike, I would recommend a hybrid bike, which is more for fitness, not like a road bike, or definitely not a mountain bike. A lot of people ride mountain bikes and they're actually built to go off-road and actually downhill, the way they're designed. So they're not a comfortable bike to ride long distance, either as a racing bike or a 10-speed. So a hybrid bike keeps you more upright. Obviously, there's a lot of people still rollerblading. You can jump rope, things like that. So there's a lot of different modes of outdoor cardio that's very effective as well. And just, again, using your technology, modern stuff, does a ton to just record what you're doing and show progress. Setting goals does a lot, and it's very, very effective. So thank you for listening. I will be providing more information to go along with these things. I did see some pictures of the gym that's available to you. If you have home equipment, apply the same things to that. But it doesn't seem like you really have a limited supply of equipment. But the right way to use it can either make or break your program and make it more or less effective. So good luck. Thank you.